watched a lot of your previous interviews, and you do a lot of them with people who are already within the spiritual community. But I think it would be awesome to sort of give your story and your voice to millennials and people my age who are spiritually open, but maybe are not as aware and could use, hearing your story. We're ahead in a lot of ways, and then we're sort of stunted in a lot of others, right?
You're stunted. I see how you're ahead, but I don't see how your generation is stunted.
Yeah, I think we have a huge promise of being the most awakened community in a long time. I definitely do think. But I think also social media and our egos have maybe taken the reins a little bit, which I'd love to talk about. But otherwise, I'm very hopeful. There's a lot of people like-minded than there are otherwise. So first and foremost, if you just want to introduce yourself to anyone who will be watching this and doesn't really have any full context, that would be awesome.
My name is Syamarani Dasi.
Yes.
And I met my spiritual master, Srila Prabhupada Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj, in 1966, which was another period, just like now, there's a period where the youth is really awakening to who am I, what am I doing here, and I'm not satisfied with the world and the government and the medicines and everything that's going on. I want some alternative. So that's how it was in my millennial generation back in the 60s.
Right.
And so at that time, Krishna, who's described in the Vedic literatures as the supreme absolute source of all existence, sent his representative from that higher realm to New York City, where I was living, and where we were protesting this, that, and the other thing, and the war in Vietnam, and flower children and all that. And he came and gave us Krishna consciousness and regulated our lives. No illicit sex, no gambling, no meat eating, no intoxication, no meat, fish, and eggs. Chant 16 rounds a day, get initiated, preach, distribute books, and use your talents in Krishna's service. And that began a complete change in my life that's been changing and changing in the same direction daily till now, 53 years later.
Which is so beautiful. And that was one of the things that I wanted to ask you about, which is if you see the parallels between the movement at that time when you were first, called, as opposed to right now, because I do see a lot of similarities. I think we had kind of some dead space in the middle, but do you see that at all?
Daily, I think this is just like the 60s awakening again. Because things have gotten so bad in the world. And really, who are what you call the millennials generation? We believe in reincarnation, which means we've had many millions of lives before. And according to our previous activities, we take birth in a particular family, a particular set of circumstances, and even a particular species. So my vision is that people have come from all over planets and universes and are taking birth now in this millennial generation and are meeting up with all the previous generations' peoples who are introducing this higher consciousness through kirtan, mantra meditation, the philosophy of bhakti yoga.
Right. It's just so insane. It feels like there's so many synchronicities lining up, and it's so beautiful to see. So I'm curious to know where you were spiritually before it is that you were called, and when this movement became, were you at all open? Did you have ideas as far as did you think anyone could descend and do, were you at all open to that? No?
Well, it's funny because those were the LSD days.
Right.
With, Timothy Leary and all those, mind travel into body, and you're God and I'm God and I'm you and you're me. Of course, this philosophy of impersonalism, that we're all one and we have no distinct personalities, and God doesn't have a distinct personality. Mm-hmm. That was prevalent then, and it's also here now.
Right.
So, as you said, there are different classes of millennials.
Right.
So then, and I was one of those LSD heads who thought that I was God. In fact, when I first met Prabhupada, in 1966, I thought that I was making this all up. I was making him up. And the first thing he said to me is, this is nothing that you or we have made up. This process is very old, simple and sublime. So I was me and my generation. We were listening to the Rolling Stones, Bob Dylan, Joan Baez, Jefferson Airplanes, and the like.
Right.
And that was all the LSD, Let's Change Society, and Be God leaders of the youth.
Right.
So what I was only open to was how I can be God and have all these visions. I wasn't open to what happened. But by Prabhupada's power, because I was also admitting, and this is the time that we come into spiritual life when we realize how miserable we are.
Right.
Since the beginning of time, in all the different species, we've been trying to enjoy and exploit, enjoying these various bodies and minds and intellectual pursuits. And when we get really frustrated and everything goes wrong, that's when we become open to a change in ourselves. That's
Right.
something coming from a higher realm, because we can't change ourselves. Something, you said, descending to give us mercy.
Of course. And I know you mentioned about you guys would be using LSD in those days. I know a lot of people in my generation who are seeking spiritual enlightenment stuff. They would use like LSD and magic mushrooms, as they say. What is your stance on that? I am curious, because I think it's a very divisive topic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So on that very first day when I was on LSD,
Right.
I asked Prabhupada, so now I'm high,
Mhm.
and I love it, expanded consciousness on LSD.
Right.
Can I just stay like this? Because my experience was there's always crashes of big major depressions and horror trips. So Prabhupada's reply was, no, it's material and therefore it's temporary.
Exactly.
Everything temporary has two other features, which is that it's not ananda, it's not blissful, it's miserable. It ends up being miserable.
Mm-hmm.
We notice that even if I have a thought and it appears to be a happy thought just daily, and I pursue that, and it's a material thought, it always ends up like a bad LSD trip of misery. So, Satchidananda is the nature of the spiritual world, eternal, full of bliss, and full of knowledge. So material means asit, asat, achit, and nirananda. Temporary, full of misery, and full of ignorance as well. So although all these things like ayahuasca and LSD appear to be mind expanding and give me so many visions and awareness, when one is actually serious about spiritual life, he will give up those because he finds them not any more helpful.
Right.
He finds that the pure bhakti processes that have been given by the disciplic succession of great sages and saints and our scriptures, which have no beginning. So once we become serious, then we understand that it's the ageless processes that were given by our sages and the scriptures and are coming down in an unbroken chain of disciplic succession and have given us the main process of self-realization in this age, which is the chanting of the Hare Krishna mantra. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare.
Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
And other ancient Vedic mantras, reading the literature, taking the foodstuffs that were first offered to Krishna, and taking the remnants of that, and that also gets rid of our past misdemeanors, the results of our past misdemeanors, because why do we suffer? So similarly, we're in a suffering condition, like I have a broken leg, my wife just left me, I became blinded. It's because I did that to somebody else in the past.
Oh, wow.
It's akin to the Christian Bible, which says, as you sow, so shall you reap.
Right.
We may be able to get away with things by imperfect man-made laws, but not by God's perfect laws.
Right.
So prasadam, when we chant, prasada means the remnants of food that's been offered to Krishna. When we chant Hare Krishna, read the literatures, associate with pure devotees, discuss Krishna, hear about him, we become free from those reactions so that there's no longer an impediment to our spiritual progress and no longer taking birth and death in this world of birth, old age, disease, and death.
Right. I see a lot of people sort of seek this knowledge, and they are dependent on things like, you know, whatever drugs that will get them there. And while I understand it, sort of opening your mind to it, it's just, you don't realize that it's supposed to come from within you, that you understand and then you have it unlocked, as opposed to being dependent on something, because that it becomes something impure. So I totally agree with you on that. So I think I wanted to ask is that now that you're so far removed from your materialistic self, now upon reflection, do you see what it is that you were maybe the most tainted by, or what you see people right now being the most tainted by?
Well, I would say for me and everybody, it's lust, anger, greed, pride, illusion, and envy.
Right.
Those things hurt others and hurt ourselves. And it's what makes the world go round.
Would you say that those are all derivative of ego, or do you think that they're all like individual thing? Yeah.
It's a false ego.
Right.
I think I'm this body, and everything in relation to this body is mine. There's even a Sanskrit term which is called aham meti. I am this body, and everything in relation to this body is mine. Everything is meant for my enjoyment, my exploitation of others. As opposed to what we learn in the Vedic literatures, which is to be like a tree. A tree doesn't live for himself, he lives for others. Even when he's very hungry or thirsty, he'll never ask for water. And his everything is meant for others. His bark, his shade, his leaves, his flowers, his fruits, his trunk. And even if a woodcutter would come to cut him down, still he'll offer that woodcutter the shade and everything.
But people in your life, were they accepting of this new journey that you were embarking on, or did you have to lose a lot of people? Because I wonder about that, you know?
Yeah, I had to lose a lot of people.
I would assume so, of course. What was that like for you, just mentally?
Well, for some strange reason, that was one of the things that I didn't really mind.
Right.
I was already experiencing the higher taste of spiritual camaraderie. And I could see that these other so-called friends and relatives, what they didn't want to connect with me anymore about, and the feeling was mutual, was that they didn't believe in what I believed in. And then how can you have a sincere conversation? And also they were attached to the things that I was now giving up.
Value,
like and the like.
I mean, and also when you're experiencing a new sort of pure happiness, it's like, why would I even indulge in? Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And so you go on, and I love the story of, like, you say you're a mediocre artist and you meet your spiritual masters. But that's what makes the story just so all the more incredible. But can you tell me a little bit, because I know you had multiple spiritual masters. Can you tell me a little bit about the first one you met and otherwise and stuff?
The spiritual masters that I have had and have,
yes,
because even after they leave physically, we still have them.
Right.
They have the power to be present, even when their external features aren't present. Chastise us, and they can encourage us, they can empower us to do things that are impossible. I was a student at City College of New York, And I was studying art and history and all the regular subjects, but I liked art. And then we had an art exhibit in the school, and I invited a friend of mine, and he said, well, which one is yours? And everybody's pictures were on the walls. So I don't know why I said it, but which is the worst one, I said. And he picked mine. When Prabhupada sent one of his students to ask me what talent I have, I said, well, I like art. And immediately Prabhupada engaged me in copying Indian prints, which would turn into paintings, big paintings, to be put on his temple walls. And though my paintings were not 1/10 as good, everything was out of proportion and flat and black, big black outlines around everything, still he put them on his wall. He encouraged me individually and also in public. Like, for example, he was once giving an example in his morning class in Lower East Side in New York. That was his first temple. And he was saying that Krishna has been eternally creating. I mean, he's the eternal source of everything. And this material world, which has been there from the beginning of time, has come out of him, the whole cosmic manifestations of millions of planets, but he has not diminished at all. Then he gave an analogy that the sun has been shining since the beginning of the creation and giving off its heat and light and nourishing the universe, but it hasn't gotten smaller or diminished.
Right.
He said, just like our Jadharani, she has painted so many pictures of Krishna, but she has not diminished. So he, encouraged me in the public and also individually. He told me to flood the world with these paintings. But he did say at some point, because in the beginning he kept saying things like, my second painting, he said, now who could look at this and say that is not God, even though it was so bad. Later on, when I did get a little better, he said, in the beginning, she could not paint, but I encouraged her, and now she's coming so good.
Yeah.
Got a little more better, he said, in the beginning, she could not paint, but by hearing and chanting about Krishna, the talent came out. So he remained externally in the world until 1977.
Okay.
I was kind of like wandering until 92, when I met Prabhupada's intimate friend and disciple, not by initiation, but by instruction. There's two kinds of gurus. One is the initiating spiritual master, and one is the instructing spiritual master.
Oh, okay.
My second spiritual master, Srila Bhaktivedanta Narayan Goswami Maharaj, who we call Gurudev. And so he became a major successor of Srila Prabhupada's legacy. So they're in the same line. So he continued the same teaching, giving more revelation and understanding from that platform that Prabhupada gave.
Right.
In fact, Prabhupada didn't stop there, because now when I look at his books again, so many years later, from what I'd heard from Srila Narayan Goswami Maharaj, Srila Gurudev, I'm seeing tons of new stuff in Prabhupada's books to corroborate what I'm now hearing. And anyway, Prabhupada said his books are like time bombs, which means they just keep going off more and more, and you keep getting more and more realization, because the books are alive.
Right, totally. And they probably become more and more relevant as well, I would assume.
Right? Exactly.
And so within the time of meeting your initiator, your instructor, and that was, you said 77 to 92, right?
Yes.
That was that's the time that you're going to be accounting for, because I understand you have a memoir coming out, right?
Yeah, it's coming out in a couple of months, and I'll be accounting for it. Because when I was in the group of our Prabhupada's disciples, we were all together and helping each other with the book paintings as translations of the ancient Vedic scriptures. But then certain things happened in the institution that I wasn't in favor of, so I left and was looking for something. It was very demoralizing and depressive.
Right.
But I did take a year course in an art school because I figured, well, I had so much help when I was within the group, and now I'll be painting alone. So I need to get the tools that I had as a joint group. So I went to art school for a year, and then I continued painting for his books. I went back to the temple because I couldn't do it on my own. I went back to the temple, and I kept painting for his books and preaching and giving classes, sometimes radio shows or TV, and traveling around the world and speaking about Krishna consciousness, but still feeling empty. And so then in 1992, when I was in India, a god sister of mine introduced me to Srila Gurudev, and then it was so much reawakening from that point on.
That must be such an interesting time, and just in that period of sort of refining yourself and recalibrating. So I'm very excited to read about that.
Yeah, it's supposed to come out in October. Of course, a man proposes, God disposes, but that's our plan.
Of course, yeah. We'll see how it actually, yeah. But I'm very excited for that. That's awesome. We mentioned this obviously earlier, but you were one of the first devotees of the Krishna consciousness movement, which, like I said, I see so many parallels right now. But I'm curious to know what singular aspect of his teachings and of that movement do you feel like my generation, or just the population in general right now, what do you think that they should encompass more if you were to pick a singular aspect of just his teachings?
I would say we're not this body, part and parcel of God, of Krishna. Just as my hands are part and parcel of my body, and my hands serve my body, this hand is not just going to feed the other hand. It's going to put the food in the stomach, and the energy is going to be distributed. So we are servants of Krishna, and if my hand is not working with my body, it's independent, what's it called? A sick hand, right? Like palsy or something.
Right.
When it's working in full cooperation with the body, then it gets nourished, and everything around it, the other hands and feet and stuff, get nourished. So we're not this body. The body is just like a coat, and the mind, the subtle body, is just like a shirt. So who we are is part and parcel of Krishna. We're servants of Krishna in particular relationships, either as a friend or a servant or a beloved or as a parent. Just like we have here, our spiritual forms have there in the spiritual world. So to get there, we want to use all of our senses in the service of the master of the senses. And the main process of all the processes that I just mentioned in this discussion is the chanting of the Hare Krishna mantra.
I've been incorporating more chanting into my meditations. Just the most, you don't realize the power of it until you really do it. So I am going to start incorporating like those kind of mantras, because I'm taking my baby steps, but I can imagine how powerful that would be. Oh my gosh. Absolutely.
Yeah, whenever Gurudev would give initiations, the mantra, like he would give this seed of love of God, impregnate that in the heart at the time of initiation, and then that seed gradually grows into a big, beautiful plant with fruits and flowers of a particular relationship with Krishna. So at most of his initiation ceremonies, he would say, Krishna's name has the same power as Krishna. Just as Krishna can create innumerable universes, not planets, but universes, in one moment, destroy them in the next moment, and recreate them in the next moment. So the holy name has that power. And all of God's beauty, mercy, everything is there. He's invested in the holy names.
Wow, that's insane. And so what do you think, just as us being, as a spiritual beings in this body vessels, what do you think our purpose here on earth is then? What have you found it to be at this point in your journey?
Well, let me ask you a question. What's the purpose of a parent begetting a child?
to care and to raise them, no? I would think.
Raise them for what?
In the most loving and healthy way possible, I would say.
That's to be fabulous being.
Right.
Also, to have a fabulous, loving relationship.
Right.
Not that I just give love to my child, but the child also gives love to me.
Right.
It's a beautiful pleasure bond.
Right.
Really, Krishna creates all of us souls.
Yeah.
And puts us on this planet, that planet, in different kinds of bodies, because we turned away from him. We're the ones that turned away from him. So Maya or illusion grabbed us and threw us all over the place in 8,400,000 species of life. So why are we here then? Is for one purpose, is to realize who I am and to make myself happy with that realization and to give that happiness to all others, irregardless of caste, creed, color, species. Like, what does that mean? Irregardless of species. If I see an ant, instead of stepping on the ant, I'm going to say, Hare Krishna, brother. And then he'll get a better life in his next life.
Oh, that's so, yeah. I think everyone could live a much more fulfilling life if we had at least an inch of that mindset, I would think. So, open just having this conversation, people saying it, they can grab something from it, because that is so gorgeous. It really is. So the art of spiritual life, which I believe the memoir is called, right? We're all highly anticipating that, especially me, because I'm just very curious to know just that journey and that part of you. But your story is so beautiful, and I'm going to be, of course, showcasing all of the art throughout this, because I think people really need to see it. I'm enamored by it, and just because this is for millennials, if there's any last message that you want to say to our generation, because you are hopeful, as I've seen, for the way that we are shaping the world now and trying to save it in the best way that we can. So yes, if you have any messages for us or for me that I would take as well.
I'm always overwhelmed by your generation, of how quickly you take to Krishna consciousness, and what took me like 30 years to come to, I'm seeing you people coming in a few minutes.
Is the time, you know what I mean? So
open the newspapers, either on the internet or in, paper. Everything is so horrible.
I know.
Like the Amazon forest just being burnt to bits, and China just is invading Hong Kong, which was a free country, and all the wars and all of our young men being drafted into so many countries' wars and being killed for no reason and no positive change. Yeah, it's outrageous.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I think we're being faced with either do we complain about it and maintain this negative state, or do we, fight back in the way that we've seen?
There's a system of success. I don't know if you've heard of it. It's called 7 Habits for Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey. They have videos online. And the first habit for effective people is to be proactive. And the reason I thought about that is because you just said, well, either we could just get negative about it, and then within that habit, they talk about 2 circles. There's the small circle, let's say there's the big circle, which is the circle of concern. Something I'm concerned about, but there's nothing I can do about it, and it's generally negative. And then within that, there's a smaller circle called the circle of influence, which is let's do something positively. And then by concentrating on the circle of influence, it expands and overtakes the circle of concern.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and that can apply to so many different ways of being. But yeah, absolutely. I mean, it also is so much energy is attracted to what you're focusing on. So if you focus on, we're upset about this, as opposed to let's create as much love and as much beauty as we can and counteracting it. I think we can, rebuild in the best way possible. And so I'm doing my part by just trying to have as much beautiful conversation as I can and get the awareness out there. So I really am so grateful that you were open to speaking with me today. I really do appreciate it. And I hope the internet thing is it's a great tool, but it's kind of annoying. I hope one day we can be in person and I can.
Yeah, I look forward to that.
Yeah, absolutely. But thank you so much, and please continue spreading your light.
And,
oh, sorry.
And thank you for you spreading your light, and thank you for doing what you're doing, Jazmin. You look like Jazmin.
I love that. Thank you. I love her. Awesome. Well, I hope you have a beautiful day.
You too, Jazmin.
Right? Enjoy it.
Okay. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.